address in order to restore dutiful democracy and to secure the solutions needed to avert catastrophe and protect the future. It becomes not only our right, but our sacred duty to rebel. We hereby declare the bonds of the social contract to be null and void, which the government has rendered invalid by its continuing failure to act appropriately. We call upon every principled and peaceful citizen to rise with us. We demand to be heard, to apply informed solutions to these ecological crises, and to create a National Assembly by which to initiate those solutions needed to change our present cataclysmic course. We refuse to bequeath a dying planet to future generations by failing to act now. We act in peace, with ferocious love of these lands in our hearts. We act on behalf of life. That is the Extinction Rebellion Declaration of Rebellion. And it's in that spirit that we come and we stand together now. I just want to remind everyone that these roads, this space is being held for us by brave rebels who are blocking transport from accessing this site at Oxford Circus, Edgware Road and Park Lane. Over the course of this day, please make sure that you go down to one of those areas, that you ask someone there whether they need to be relieved, and that you give people a break. Don't leave now, but do remember that you are part of this rebellion. You are a participant, and we need you to replace and to give those people. You need to become the rebellion. You need to be there as well. So we're now going to hear from Matthew Shrittman, who is a climate scientist. And after Matthew, we're going to have Alabama 3. Do tweet out about this, people. Bring more people.
I've just been in Fleece and I've noticed that they've had to wrap up.
This one is going to get chilly, alright?
Nope, it's going to be fun.
Hi everyone, I'm a scientist and my name is Matthew Shrittman. And I'm just here with some humble numbers. I'm going to start with the 5 and count down until we're out of time. Number 5. That is the hundreds of years it takes for topsoil degraded by intensive farming to recover a single centimetre. Nowadays, between 1/3 and 1/2 of all the global topsoil is considered to be degraded. Many parts of the world are thought to only have a few decades of harvest left, and then we're looking at the entire length of civilization multiple times over to recover the soil. Meanwhile, we literally have no technology at all to accelerate the recovery of degraded topsoil, and very little research is being done, almost as if we think someone else is going to solve this problem for us. No one is going to do that if we don't. 4 is a percentage. If you put all the land mammals in the world in a giant pile, then less than 4% of that pile would be wild animals. That includes everything from squirrels to elephants, beavers to tigers, mongooses, all the good ones. And meanwhile, about 28% of that pile would be humans. For the record, the biggest chunk, 41%, would be entirely cows. We raise cows because they give us protein from grass, right? Ideal in the past, when the problem was making enough food. But we now know that cows are one of the most inefficient and polluting protein sources in the world. And now that 1/3 of all food in the world is wasted, it's total madness that we have so many cows. The amount of pollution from cows is staggering. I didn't believe it when I was first learning about it. Using conservative numbers, really conservative numbers actually, a single person switching an average amount of beef for animal-free proteins, even if they kept eating other meats, saves as much CO2 as giving up cars entirely. That includes driving and being driven. And over a year, the same switch for one person saves enough land to grow the trees for 7 million sheets of paper, and the same amount of water as switching your kitchen tap on full blast and leaving it for 6 days. Number three is the hundreds of kilograms of plastic that enters the ocean every single second. Nowadays, the vast majority of sea creatures tested are found to contain plastic, and those particles of plastic are acting as magnets for oceanic pollutants, concentrating them into the food chain, our food chain. People know how bad the plastic problem is, and yet our supermarkets remain crammed full of it. It's absolutely heartbreaking that our government has managed just a 5p charge for carrier bags and a tax for plastic packaging, not even due for another 3 years, that only taxes plastic packaging if it's less than 30% recycled. It's nowhere near enough, and they expect supermarkets to take care of the rest. This is an ongoing problem, that governments expect people and corporations to manage so much more of their own pollution and carbon footprint. It's kind of like the government saying, we're going to do away with all the laws, and meanwhile, can everyone please just not do any murdering or crime or anything like that? Thanks. This isn't how it should work. Do we think that large-scale pollution should be a crime? Yes. And how do we manage criminal problems with laws and enforcement? Global governments are not doing anywhere near enough. There's mounting evidence that the plastic problem is getting so bad that there are tiny particles of plastic in the air that we're all breathing in right now. Number two. Two is a very scary one. Despite the fact that we're pulling more oil out of the ground every single year, the estimated quantity of oil in the world isn't going down. It's going up by 2% every year, and has done for the past 10 years. Every year we're finding more oil far faster than we're even using it. Fossil fuels are never going to run out to save us from ourselves, and they won't even come close to running out before we turn this planet into an unlivable sauna. And number one, that's the number of habitable planets that we know of, and therefore the number of chances that we have to get this right. We don't know what's going to happen if we carry on polluting as we are doing, but we know that it's going to be very bad. The best case scenario involves some pretty radical changes in sea level, availability of water, and availability of food. The worst case scenario involves large-scale acidification of the oceans and oxygen-producing plankton dying in droves, and none of us being able to breathe. So I'm going to head down that way after this. The air is now changing faster than it has for at least 1 million years. 17 of the 18 warmest years since the 1800s occurred in the last 18 years, and meanwhile, changes in our oceans are occurring at a rate that hasn't been seen in at least 250 million years. And what happened 250 million years ago? An extinction event literally called the Great Dying, in which the ocean became highly acidic, methane-producing bacteria flourished, and 96% of all the previously living species on Earth disappeared forever. How on earth have we found ourselves living on an Earth where the evidence is so clear, the messengers so well-meaning, so careful in their research and so desperately trying to be heard, and yet terrible decisions, with awful environmental consequences, are still being made? Over the hills and far away there's a person with a beating heart and a thinking mind, who's been exposed to different things in life, thinking it's okay to sign a piece of paper allowing drilling in a fragile ocean, or mining in a dwindling rainforest, or the construction of a new coal-fired power station under a smoky sky. This isn't just a crisis of the environment, this is a crisis of information. I refuse to believe that people are so fundamentally evil as to both truly and deeply understand the risks and dangers we face, and not be doing all that they can to avert disaster. I think we need to help people to understand. We're here today as global citizens, here to help people to understand. Just because the world is full of ingrained normalities doesn't mean that they all make sense. Like, have you heard that experiment? There's this really cool experiment with monkeys and a ladder. It's cool in that it's interesting, but it's also not cool in that it's an animal experiment. But a ladder was set up with a load of delicious bananas at the top, in the middle of a monkey enclosure. The ladder was set up such that any time a monkey tried to climb it, cold showers were activated across the entire enclosure. And before long, the monkeys learned to stop other monkeys from trying to climb the ladder, attacking any who did so. Gradually, the experimenters introduced new monkeys who learned from the old monkeys not to climb the ladder and to punish others who tried. And gradually they removed all of the monkeys until there were no monkeys who even knew why the ladder wasn't to be climbed, and the showers were even deactivated. Yet still, no monkeys climbed the ladder that was now perfectly okay to climb. As adults, we get into our heads that the way things are is what normal is and what normal should be. But it shouldn't be normal to hunt fish stocks to extinction or destroy what remains of the rainforests, or to carry on emitting greenhouse gases when we know what they're doing. The other day I was teaching a young student of mine, and in the middle of the lesson I decided just to sit upside down on my chair with my legs in the air for about 2 minutes. Not only did he not say anything, I don't think he even thought it was important enough to remember. Why should it be important if someone sits upside down for 2 minutes, right? Sometimes it takes children, not affected by the preconceptions and expected normalities of adults, to see what's actually important. Is this why it's taking children marching in the streets to tell our leaders something that's totally obvious? That what we're doing with the planet is total madness. This isn't something we can try to sort out later when we find out how bad it is. I had a big piece of paper, where's it gone? I'll use this. The Earth's climate is kind of like holding a piece of paper vertically. So kind of like this. As you put more CO2 into it, it becomes more unstable. And eventually, it gets to a point where large-scale change occurs and it collapses. But here's the interesting bit. If you start moving your hands up the piece of paper, start trying to remove CO2 from the climate, it doesn't suddenly become stable again. You have to get your hands all the way to the top of the paper before it rights itself. We're putting the climate in a situation similar to this, where we're about to fall off the edge of a cliff, and we have no idea how difficult it will be to get back to where it is now. But we know that it's going to be a lot harder than most people think. 300 parts per million is around the highest the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere has been for the past million years or so. In fact, on average, it's been around 220 parts per million, but in barely the time it takes an oak tree to grow, we've now pushed the concentration up to 400 parts per million. We're already getting unprecedented heat waves, increased flooding, droughts, and worsening hurricanes. Collapse is nearing, and change isn't coming from the top. Our global system is built to optimize for money and profit, and this is a problem because it's very difficult to make environmentalism profitable. A mountain has no price until it's crushed into minerals. A river has no price until it's blocked by a wall and turning turbines. And a tree has no price until it's a pile of paper bills. Who can protect these things if the system is set up to make destroying them profitable? Governments. We need governments that represent us, governments that respect that this is an emergency. Only 6 of 151 countries have set targets for reducing climate change that are actually in line with their own commitments to the Paris Agreement. 6 in 151. In Holland, the people sued their own government for not doing enough about climate change, and they won. Same in Pakistan, and the same in Colombia. Even conservative legal systems are starting to accept that governments are doing nowhere near enough to protect us from impending disaster. We're made to think that solutions aren't obvious or straightforward, but it's nonsense. Polluting industries need to be taxed much more. Polluting foods need to be taxed much more. And polluting transport needs to be taxed much more. And all of the money from these taxes needs to be poured into research that might be able to help us. And if that doesn't work, we need bigger change. We're running out of time. We don't know when the proverbial asteroid is coming to hit us, but it's coming very fast. For far too long, governments have been ignoring scientists. Selfless people who do what they do because they want to make the world a better place. It's time to listen and to act. Here we are, the first generation to be feeling the effects of climate change, and very probably the last generation that can do anything about it. Thanks for listening. If you want a copy of the script, I'll put that online. Just search Matthew Shribman or Science in the Bath, and you'll find it there. Thanks.
But don't ever say hate is very good. Love has practically caused me to get you destroyed. If I had hated a little more, just a little more, we would have had a little less trouble. I look at my faults analytically. Sure, you gotta love. Principle! Don't say hate is my enemy. What does it say? What's that word? Hate is my enemy. I gotta fight it day and night. One of us up there in the line. Love's the only weapon. Shit! Bullshit! Martin Luther King died was love. Kennedy died talking about something he couldn't even understand. Some kind of generalized love, and he never even backed it up. He stopped out. Bullshit! Love is the only weapon with which I got to fight. I got a hell of a lot of weapons to fight. I got my premise of Mao? Mao Zedong said there's only one way a revolution can come. Do you know, Millie? How did Mao Zedong say the only way you can bring a revolution and keep it?
Well, the only way I think you can keep it by being peace and being honorable.
Oh, shit, being at peace. Mao Zedong said that? Oh. No. He's the head of China. He's the head of the revolution of China. He marched 6,000 people on a long march.
I had my mind on something else.
Okay, well, what did he say? There's only one way you can bring about a revolution for the
Only
people.
way you can bring it on is by killing.
Shut down my chakra, shoot Shiva off of my shell. Take down my tie-dyes, my Tibetan bells. I'll cool down karma with a can of OPT. There ain't no call for Castaneda in my frontline labyrinth. There's one thing I know, I ain't gonna go, 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 I ain't dancing, trance, no thanks, no chance to tranquilize me. I ain't sipping no smart boy drink that don't satisfy me. Don't sit on my dharma with a drop of gasoline. I ain't down with talents that can touch it, match it, talk, it doesn't move. There's something I know. For the FBI.
Government seems to be losing already in the mood. We stopped buying those unfriendly spray, and the makers changed them right away. We turned our attention to the plight of the whales, and between us, we've really tipped the scale. So realise the power of the individual. Remember that love is a special tool. It's not that you need your life to change, but your priorities rearrange. By losing that conformity mold, you follow your heart, not what you're told. Thousands of people all over the land doing their thing and making a stand. Actions and deeds that free the mind. Get rid of those thoughts of the guilty kind. If you want to do something and you don't know what to do, here's my message directed to you. Saving the world is not too hard. You just got to start in your own back. Here's a few things you can tell people to do. Switch off and light, save energy. Don't fill the kettle to make one cup of tea. Recycle, paper, the metal, the glass. Stop the landfill tip. Filling up with work. Avoid buying objects you don't really need. Resist the temptation of envy and greed. Don't get caught in the consumer trap. That's just part of the problem, right? So, refuse, recycle, repair. You'll find that most of the answer is there. Give respect to everything. Enjoy the rewarding that is free. You don't have to obey any special law. It's entirely up to the individual.
Yeah, exactly. Just the bread stuff. Oh, well, no, I just think, yes, I think that'll be fine. Don't worry, we can do, I think it's quite relaxed. We can just do what we like. I just want to spend time with you and Luna. Oh, my friend who I've just met. Another friend. All right then, big love.
It's hard, man.
Don't, just do. It's just.
How long have you been down there? Oh, well, I've been everywhere.
Anything.
Huh? I've been everywhere. Yeah, me too. Yeah. I'm feeling it now, man. I'm fucking pretty tired.
I don't want that to spread.
Well, I've kind of been in training for it. Because I was at Grenfell yesterday for the silent walk, so that's a good starter to get you walking. And then I rested all day.
We don't know what's going on.
Caught the lunchtime news because I didn't want to believe what they were telling me. And you have to come and have a look for yourself these days because certain sources aren't reliable. You need to go and be an eyewitness. And I witnessed some very, very good things. This is all very nice.
Yeah,